Welcome back to the Money Focus Podcast. I'm your host, Moses the Mentor. And on this episode, I'm joined by Aaron Harper, who's a franchising expert and the CEO of Rolling Suds, which is a pressure washing franchise that's growing really fast. So in this episode, he's going to be helping us understand the steps of acquiring a franchise, growing a franchise, and all things franchise related. So you need to make sure that you're listening in attentively. So sit back, learn, grow, and pay it forward. Let's go. Hey, Aaron, thank you so much for joining Money Focus Podcast. Really appreciate you. And the first thing I would love for you to do is to kind of break down your career journey, your professional journey, and ultimately how you started your business. So the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I've been in the franchise industry for years. My background is working in home service franchise brands. So a lot of people think that franchising is just McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or it's only food or fast food, but it's actually this massive industry that has health and wellness brands, youth enrichment, home services. It's just a massive industry. So I didn't know that going into this, honestly. When I first got my first job in franchise development, someone was like, "You should get into franchise development." And I was like, "What's that? You mean like McDonald's?" And, but he goes, "No, there's like this home service world where you can get in for like under $250 or even $400,000 and, grow a pretty big business, based on home services." So he worked at a carpet cleaning franchise. I emailed his boss every 3 weeks for 6 months until he hired me. And that was my first job in franchising. I helped grow that. We effectively prepared that brand for exit to a private equity backed restoration company. I helped to build it to be the largest carpet cleaning company in the world. The company I was working for, they wanted to grow multiple home service platform. I wanted to build a home service platform of brands. So they bought a drywall repair brand in COVID, put me on that. We did a turnaround of that brand. There were 100 units sold, 40 franchisees, and they didn't have really any support. So we hired a brand president, and him and I turned the brand around. We launched our first franchisee at the end of 2020. He was profitable his first month. So I knew we were prepared to grow that company. So from October of 2020 to October of 2022, I personally added 223 locations to that business in 2 years. We were the 13th fastest growing franchise brand in the world. We became the largest drywall repair company in the world. And all those franchisees opened with jobs on the calendar and a full-time skilled laborer hired prior to going to training. Really set those franchisees up for success. The company that I worked for wanted me to take on a brand that was non-franchised yet. And I was like, I can do this on my own. So I sought out for a bunch of different businesses across the country that I could franchise. Met the founders of Rolling Suds, which at the time was a 33-year-old power washing business. Doing over $2 million a year. And I knew I could replicate that business hundreds and even thousands of times. So raised capital, acquired the franchise rights to the business in January of last year, partnered with the founders to create the franchise business, which is, a different business than the power washing business, which is I'm the CEO and owner of that company. So we did that. We built a franchise system around it. Started franchising end of February of last year. And we now have 187 locations in 26 states. So thank you. I have a team of over 25 people that work for me, 4 direct reports and an executive assistant. Everyone else reports to them. And we have 51 franchisees who have purchased 187 territories. So the ones who have launched with jobs and estimates on the calendar and 2 full-time employees hired prior to going to training. So none of them are doing the power washing themselves. They're all here to grow a multi-million-dollar business. And so that's kind of how I got into franchising. That's my background and how I got my business launched.
Nice. What made you, pick power washing as your next, franchise arena? Like, did you do some research to say, hey,
Sure.
There was a need there? Like, how did that come about?
So I looked at a bunch of different businesses. I looked at HVAC and plumbing and solar and tree care and epoxy coatings and garages and just a bunch of different industries. So it didn't matter to me which industry, as long as it was in the residential and commercial services space. However, there were a couple things that stood out to me about power washing in general. It's a super fragmented industry. It's a lot of high schoolers who decide they want to power wash, or guys that want to do it part-time, or they do the power washing themselves. That's the majority of the industry. And I saw an opportunity to set standards in an industry by becoming the biggest in the world. If you think through like franchises, there's no Serve Pro of power washing. There's no Stanley Steamer of power washing. Like, it doesn't exist. There's no national power washing company that you can think of. And so I saw an opportunity to build a company, and we become that. Also, the founders of the brand have perfected a proprietary way to clean buildings that is faster and better than anyone else. And it's proprietary. We build the trucks ourselves. And so, having kind of being the first professionalized service operator in an industry, along with having kind of a difference in product offering, really allows you to have a competitive edge. And then, so I thought about this, okay, well, what's going to be the thing that accelerates the business the most? Or which industry am I going to franchise that accelerates it the most? And power washing was the quickest path to that.
That makes perfect sense. But you're right. I mean, anytime I need power washing, and I always need it, if I'm, having an event at my house and I want, my driveway to look great, or I want to power wash the side of my house or something like that, I never think to call a power wash company, like you said, a Serve Pro power wash. I typically will ask like my lawn guy, like, hey, do you power wash?
Right.
Or something like that, or try to do it myself. It's not like your gold standard company that you go to anytime you need power washing service. So that does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What exactly, I was doing some research on you. What exactly do you mean by responsible franchising, and how does that relate to your current business venture?
So I've been in the franchise industry for years. And part of the reason that I decided to franchise a business on my own rather than work for a company to do it is there are some ideas about franchising that I'd like to break. And the franchise industry, there have been some bad actors that have set it on a weird course, to be honest with you. Like, most people outside of the franchise industry, they either think of like franchising as being like only McDonald's or Chick-fil-A, like I said earlier, or it's a scam. And in my experience, if you find the right brand, I don't believe there's a quicker way to wealth generation. But so many people won't look at franchising because they have these preconceived notions, or they don't know enough about it to see it as a good way. You said a lot of your audience is looking for opportunities to make more money and put their money to work and hire people and grow businesses. Franchising is a great path to that, if it's done properly. If it's not done properly, it can hurt a lot of people. And so when I first launched this, I started tweeting about responsible franchising. I started writing about it every single day. And that comment, or that topic, has picked up a lot of steam within the industry. And we had our big annual biggest conference for franchising in February, and the International Franchise Association got up on stage and said, responsible franchising, this is what we're doing now. This is who we are as an industry, and here are some tenets, and those are the 4 core tenets that I proposed. So it's really exciting to be starting a conversation that I feel like is honestly overdue, long overdue. And the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine reached out to me. He said, "Hey, I hear about this thing in the franchise industry. It's somewhere between." Called responsible franchising. I feel like it's somewhere between like a conversation and a mini movement within franchising. We want you to write a 3,000 word piece. Then we'll pair you up with a professional writer for the magazine. And so this week, it's actually being released in the newest issue of Entrepreneur Magazine. And it'll be 6 pages about responsible franchising. So really big. It's very important to me to bring franchising more into the mainstream and highlight some of the bad actors so that, people that want to get into it and build like considerable wealth, like can do that without being in a bad spot.
I think it's the right thing to do. It shows that you have some integrity about growing a business and helping people along the way. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Personally, you're welcome. Personally, I think when you mention like your McDonald's and Chick-fil-A's, people, those staples, they think those are like out of reach, as far as, it's going to take millions of dollars, right? But when it comes to a more probably attainable franchise, I think the skepticism does start to creep in. Like, is this a get rich quick scheme, or is it too good to be true? So are there some ways that a potential investor who may not have millions of dollars to go into a McDonald's, are there some ways that they can vet successfully a franchise opportunity that you would recommend?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think first and foremost, there are some people who look to franchising because they want a passive business, or they want something that like they can just put some money at, franchisor runs it, and kind of that's the thought process. That's not the case. It's not. Franchising is by no means passive. Does it accelerate the path to growth? Yes. But are you still going to be actively involved in growing the business? Yes, it's a business. And, you scale, you hire other people, then you scale into another role, and eventually you have a business that runs without you. But I don't think any business starts like that. So, barring like vending machines or something like that, where you put it somewhere and you go refill it once a week, every franchise is going to require that you are actively involved. And so if a franchise brand that you're looking at is like, yeah, you can do this passive or semi-passive, 5 hours a month, 10 hours a week, whatever, I would recommend that any person who hears that in the vetting process runs the opposite direction. And unfortunately, there are people who say that, and it's part of the problem. The other recommendation I would make is talk to existing franchisees to ask them about their experience, and call all of them, or call 5 to 10 of them. If it's a brand new brand, you won't have that. Like in our case, we've launched, just under a year and a half ago, and we have a lot of franchisees, but everyone's very early on in very early stages. But I promise you, if you talk to every single one of my franchisees and you ask them if they'd do it again, they'd all tell you yes, because they made a decision that has resulted in positive benefits in their lives, and they see a path to continuing that and continuing to increase their wealth. And I take a lot of pride in that. If you talk to the people who I franchise their business, they'll tell you that this is one of the best decisions they've ever made. And I take a lot of pride in that. And so for an early brand, if you like the concept, talk to the founder of the business or the CEO, and make sure that you believe in that leader, because so much of franchise ownership is leadership at the beginning. It's always leadership. The other thing you want to ask about is capital. So franchising, it's hard enough to start one business, let alone 2 businesses in different locations. So if I'm launching 187 locations across the country, that takes a considerable amount of capital, right? Because we get paid on royalties, but we don't get royalties until franchisees are making a lot of money, right? So it's like, but you still have to support them in order to get them to make that, right? So I raised a lot of money to do this the right way from investors that have franchised businesses before that I could develop relationships with and get mentored by. So those are some things that I would look at. A lot of it is gut, though. Like the first person who signed up with us, him and his wife, like They didn't have anyone to talk to other than me. And they were the first franchisees to sign up, and they're crushing it. But they took a chance, and they'll tell you it's the best decision they've ever made.
Talk to us about, some of the things you do to support your franchisees,
Sure.
as far as technology or just help with marketing, walk us through that support.
So a lot of franchisees or people that are looking at franchising often think that the franchisor is just a marketing company. Like, I want to be with a franchise because they're going to give me leads. While yes, we have vendors that we work with that do the lead generation for franchisees, and we have a really robust customer acquisition strategy, that is only one layer of what we do. We help franchisees get trucks. We help them get physical locations where they can park the trucks. We help them with insurance. We help them figure out how to recruit employees. Like, a good franchisor has top to bottom services, technology, tech stacks, sales scripts, call center. Like, these are all things that we've built, which allow franchisees to not have to figure it all out on their own, right? And so there's different forms of leverage, and with a franchise, you're buying, you pay an upfront fee and an ongoing royalty, but you get a lot of your time back, right? Because it would take a long time to figure all that stuff on your own. And then on an ongoing basis, you have a business coach that you're working with on a weekly basis. We have group chats for all the franchisees in Teams channels that we've created. We do a convention every single year. We have a franchise advisory council. Like, we're very involved with our franchisees to help them become successful business owners. And so marketing, call center, recruiting, lead generation, business coaching, financial modeling, technology, tech stack, insurance, site selection, trucks, equipment, like, that's everything that we do.
All the stuff that would have, taken you a boatload of time and experience, to figure out, that is what's presented for you with that upfront commitment.
That's a good franchise turns years into months, and months into days, and days into hours. That's what a good franchise does.
Sure.
Which would take a lot of time and mistakes and all that stuff to figure out on your own.
Now, I'm going to flip it a little bit because, we talked about, potential franchisees, vetting a franchisor. When it comes to you guys or just other places you may have worked, what does the vetting process look like for potential franchisees? Is it, I take everybody who has money, do they have to have a certain background? Do you do any type of vetting process to ensure that you have the right people servicing the brand as you expand? Yeah, talk to us about that.
We do an incredible amount of vetting. We've actually turned away 58 people who wanted to become franchisees, had the capital, and were not right for our system, which comes out to about $11 million in revenue that I've turned down. It's the best money I'll never make. We are super, super selective on who comes in. A lot of people end up buying a franchise and they buy a job. They leave one job, they buy another one. We're helping people build assets, not jobs. Now, initially, when you start any business, you learn every element. You learn how to hire, you learn how to fire, you learn how to train, you learn how to manipulate your P&L, you learn how to sell, you learn how to, you do all that stuff. But then you, what I like to call, fire yourself from roles. So you hire people, you put them in place, and then you replace yourself and you go to the next role. So a lot of people that buy franchises just aren't in that situation. And so most of the people I turned away, I only felt were only going to be able to buy a job, or they'd get to 2 or 3 trucks and be done with it. We're looking for people who want to build massive businesses and have the capacity, the wherewithal, and the grit. Really is what we're looking for, is grit, in order to do that. So yeah, capital is only one piece of it. I mean, in order to qualify with us, you have to have a minimum of $300,000 in liquid or liquidatable assets. But our trucks are like $150,000. But you can do, a 3,000 square foot house in 20, 25 minutes with our equipment. You can power wash 5 stories from the ground. We're doing 135,000 square foot office buildings. Like, we're really heavy in commercial. So the math works, but like when you're talking about that amount of liquidity in order to qualify, like that just is a different category of person, is at least in my experience. Also, they have to align with our 4 values, who we are, be good at building relationships and all that kind of stuff.
What about for someone who has, a fairly popular local business? They have one, storefront and doing well, right? But then, folks start getting in their ear saying, hey, I think you should franchise this. This should be great. What are some what are some cues? So let's use me as an example. Let's just say I have Moses Popcorn and I sell out every day.
Yep.
Everyone loves me. I'm making a great impact in my community. Is there ever a certain time where it's like, okay, where you should know, like, hey, this is an opportunity to take it nationwide? Or do you recommend sometimes local brands just, stay local? Like, is there certain characteristics of a business that will help it be more successful on a franchise platform?
So I think a good franchise can go anywhere. There are certain franchises that might be regional where they only work in certain markets. I'm personally only interested in franchises that can go anywhere. I think that's the best use of my time. What I will tell you and your listeners, most people should not franchise their business. And I'll tell you why. It's not to be offensive by any means, but it is a completely different business. So in your case, you have a good popcorn stand. You're good at building a successful popcorn business. The franchise business is a completely different business. You're a business coach, you're a therapist, you're a compliance officer, and you can be all those within 2 hours in one day. And, it's just a completely different industry. It's a completely different business that requires different skills. And one of the biggest challenges with franchising is anyone typically who steps into being a franchisor has to figure out how to be a franchisor. And they're figuring it out while they're launching franchisees. So franchisees are launching and they're figuring out how to support them. So the business owner is figuring out how to be a franchisor and the franchisees are figuring out how to be franchisees at the same exact time. And so you oftentimes will hear about lackluster support. And it's because they just simply, in some cases, don't know how to, or they don't have the capital. Or someone was like, you should just franchise your business because it's so successful. And they went out and got a franchise disclosure document. But that's about it. So what I would say to you that wants to get into being a popcorn franchisor is go to franchise conferences for at least a year and do serious diligence on it before saying, all right, this is something I want to do. Because it's going to cost lots of money. It's going to take away from your popcorn business. So you have to be comfortable not doing that anymore because you now are opening another business. That business will likely suffer a little bit unless you've got good infrastructure in place to be able to step aside. And you're going to burn cash for years until you get to some type of royalty numbers that are meaningful enough. You'll need at least $500,000 to $1 million, and it still might not work out. And so if you gather all that information and you're like, no, I really want to do this. Tell me how. This is what I want to do. Then I think it's a good time to franchise. But until you've figured all of that out, I do not think franchising is a good plan.
I see, great businesses that always comes up like that next tier. But, like you mentioned, you're becoming this franchisor and you're stretched so thin and it kind of loses the kind of the integrity of the business because you don't have the pieces in play to ensure that, each location is consistent. Every time I go into a McDonald's, it feels like a McDonald's, a Chick-fil-A. You have to be prepared to be able to have that type of leadership across the board. And that takes a lot. I'm sure a lot of experience, not only capital, just experience and time. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
would say one of my mentors says there's one major reason why franchisors fail, and it's lack of capital. But there's two kinds of capital. There's intellectual capital, which is how to franchise a business and what you need to do and who to hire and when and how to build infrastructure. And then there's actual capital, which is lots of money in order to be able to properly support franchisees. And most franchisors at launch don't have those things. They don't have a lot of capital to burn, and they've never franchised before. So these are questions that someone who's looking at doing diligence on a brand needs to make sure they're fully aware of before they buy a business, before they buy a franchise.
What about like emerging trends in the industry? I've seen a lot of like, remote franchise opportunities where people like working from home or something like that. I haven't seen much integration with AI. I don't know if you have anything to add there, but what are you seeing with franchising that excites you or potentially even scares you a little bit? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So the stuff that excites me is responsible franchising and the conversation around doing things the right way and providing the support necessary for franchisees to be successful. That excites me. What makes me nervous is franchisors saying you can run this business from a different state by sitting on your couch and checking in on your computer once a day. That terrifies me. Because that kind of like promise of a passive business or a semi-passive business, it's just in my experience especially with an emerging brand, that doesn't exist. And so I want to make sure that people who come into the franchising world, while it's responsible for us to tell franchisees that, the franchisees or prospective franchisees who come in, they need to know what they're responsible for, which is making sure that they vet the opportunity enough to say, all right, like I believe I can do this. But if anyone's coming to the franchise world for like a get rich quick scheme or like I'm going to run this passive, I'm going to keep my job full time, I just wouldn't recommend doing that. In my experience, I'm not saying it doesn't happen ever. But what I'm saying is most of the people who will buy that type of business under that type of assumption end up having to leave their job anyways to make the business work.
Hey, I hope the audience is listening in. I mean, you've been doing it for a long time. So talk to us about what's next for Rolling Suds. You did this tremendous, transformation of the brand and you're growing it at a rapid pace. But what do you have on deck for the company moving forward?
Yeah. So, I mean, my plan for the rest of my life is to launch franchise brands that live by a similar core set of principles that are based around responsible franchising practices, and hiring really good people to grow those businesses with me. I'm in the process of building a C-suite right now. A lot of businesses wait till pretty far down the road to get a C-suite. We're building a C-suite before we need a C-suite, because that's kind of the way I look at business is like, let's build the team before you need the team. We will have about 300 locations by this time next year. And that's really exciting. That very rarely happens. And we're planning our annual convention, and we have franchisees that are like, on track to do 4 trucks within the first 2 years. Like we have some really aggressive operators coming in to grow really big businesses. So while the first step is selling and awarding the franchises, the next step is helping them all get through those first 2 years of their business with the support necessary to be successful. And that's really what we're focused on now. My team is. We've got, like I said, over 25 people on the team that are all supporting franchisees. And so this is a big deal for me to make sure that franchisees are successful. They have opportunities to grow their business, acquire other locations, more trucks, all those types of things that you do when you want to grow a business. And eventually I'll launch other brands. But for now, my primary focus is Rolling Suds.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. You said, "Hey, I'm gonna be doing this the rest of my life." So, so it doesn't end with Rolling Suds. You'll keep thriving, and I guess you'll identify some type of successor, and when you go into a next your new brand. So, so
Yep.
kudos to you.
Thank you.
Um, Go ahead and kind of let us know, like, what are your final thoughts or advice for the audience? And also, if someone is interested in Rolling Suds, let us know how a potential and franchisee could reach out to you for more information. How can we contact you? Your website, social media. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about Rolling Suds and becoming a franchisee, you can go to rollingsudsfranchise.com and click Get Started. And then you'll get paired up with someone from my team. You'll go through a set of stages and interview process, make sure it's a right fit for everyone involved. And then the final approval step would be with me. And so that's there. If you just want to learn more about franchising because you're interested in franchising, I would follow me on social media. I put out content every single day about franchising. I make it super simple and really kind of make it easy to understand. One of my personal goals is to make franchising a little bit more mainstream. So kind of help transform it from within, and then bring it to the rest of the kind of general public. So I put a lot of content out on Twitter and LinkedIn. So my Twitter's Aaron Harper CEO, AARON HARPER CEO. And then you can just search Aaron Harper Rolling Suds LinkedIn online. You can connect with me and follow me there. And then my my Instagram is Aaron T as in Timothy Harper. And so I put video content out there as well. We'll be building a YouTube channel this year and then launching a podcast on the back half of the year. So really excited to continue to build an audience around just franchising in general.
Great. And I'll make sure to include all of your contact information in the show notes. It was great to hear more information about franchising. It's something, I wanted to learn about, and I'm sure the audience will, be leaning in and listening in attentively. And I hope everyone reaches out to Aaron, even if you're not interested in Rolling Suds, but make sure to follow him on social media so you can learn about franchising so you can do it the right way. So thank you so much, Aaron, for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.